All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hey, my name is Dave Eng, and I am the Director of Student Activities at St. Thomas Aquinas College. I am also a doctoral student and researcher in games. I study games, gamification, and games-based learning. The presentation you're about to see today is called Pokemon Go in Higher Ed, Experiential Education in the Digital Environment, and it's all about a study that I ran examining how we use games and gamification and games-based learning in education right now, how augmented reality like Pokemon Go is affecting that, and what we are going to do in the future. So who here by show of hands is here at PAX for the first time? All right, cool. So I realize that there are a ton of other really great and cool things you could be doing right now. So I thank you very much for coming to watch my presentation. Before I go forward, I want to know a little bit about you. And in order to do that, I'm going to need you to take out your cell phone. So if you have a cell phone, please take it out. If you have a cell phone, I would like you to send me a text message. And in that text message, I want you to send it to the number 37607, and in the body I want you to write my full name, DAVENG396, and then I'm going to want you to answer this question. So after you send me this text message to the phone number 37607, and in the message field I want you to write my full name, DAVENG396. I want you to answer the following question. I've participated in at least one of the following: internships, study abroad, co-op, or outdoor education. If you have done that before, respond with the letter A. If you have not, respond with the letter B. And if you're not sure, respond with the letter C. So again, if you have a cell phone, I'd like you to take it out right now. If you've ever participated in one of the following before: an internship, study abroad, co-op, or outdoor education, I want you to respond with the letter A. If not, I want you to respond with the letter B. And if you're just not sure, respond with the letter C. So again, if you have a cell phone out right now, I'd like you to send me a text message. That phone number is going to be 37607, and in order to join the poll, I want you to send my full name, DAVENG396, and it looks like you have broken my poll. So we are no longer accepting responses, but it looks like a lot of you have done at least one of the following. Oh wait, you have not broken, oh, you've broken my poll? Okay, it's broken, it's broken. So at least one of you, you've participated in at least one of the following before: an internship, study abroad, co-op, or outdoor education, which is great because those are all forms of experiential education and learning, which we'll go through. So you all are doing really good right now. I just have another question I want you to ask, and you can respond via your phone again. So it is the same message field. And the question I want to ask you is, how have you learned information in the following ways? So if you've gotten information by reading articles online, I want you to respond with the letter A. If you've gotten information by watching videos online, I want you to respond with the letter B. And if you've gotten information by discussing information via email, social media, or discussion boards, I want you to respond with the letter C. So no wrong answers here, just the most ways that you've gotten information. Looks like you've broken my poll once again. And I am no longer accepting responses. So it looks like it is pretty close there. So you've learned a lot by reading articles online. A lot of you have also learned by watching videos online. And then a small number of you have learned by discussing information via email and social media and discussion boards. So that's great. I have one more question for all of you, and it's probably the most important one that I will ask you today. But during the summer 2016, were you busy catching them all? So if you were, I want you to respond with the letter A. And if you are not, I want you to respond with the letter B. And if you are a Pokemaster, I want you to respond with the letter C. So again, if you were catching Pokemon this summer, respond with the letter A. If you are not, respond with the letter B. And if you're a Pokemaster, respond with the letter C. Poll broken again. Okay, so a bunch of you are pretty modest. You have been playing Pokemon this summer. Awesome. I'm also a Pokemon Go player. A couple of you are very egotistical and think that you're a Pokemaster, which I will accept. I'll accept for. But thank you for providing all of that information. I really appreciate it. So I just want to go through some info about what we'll cover today. So again, this presentation is called Experiential Education in the Digital Environment. So here are the 4 areas we're going to cover. 1, what exactly is experiential education? So I kind of went through it before: internships, study abroad, cooperatives, outdoor education. But how does it apply to the digital environment? 2nd, what is digital education? I know some of you have heard about online education, remote education, and other forms like that. We're going to go through that in depth. The 3rd thing we're going to cover is, how do these 2 things blend? So yeah, we have experiential learning, And yes, we have digital education, but how do these two things meet together? And the last thing is, how are both of these things going to affect higher ed? Because I've been working in higher education, colleges and universities for the past 10 years. It's been most of my experience. And this is how I think most people in higher ed would address how this is changing them right now. There's not usually an awkward silence at this part of the presentation. It's usually a video. I'm going to give you 3 more seconds, computer. All right, so now that that talking point has been effectively eliminated. No, change is happening in higher education. What is happening right now? Well, the thing I want to point out is that students, can I get a by show of hands, who here is in college right now, a college student? Okay, a lot of you. So some of you may actually be some of my students, which would be kind of weird, but thank you for coming. So students are already interacting digitally. This is nothing new. What I propose, at least through the studies that I've done, is that we should be able to utilize this digital learning for the best possible outcome. And the other thing that I believe that we need to address is the way that we teach students. So there is traditional and there's emergent learning. Traditional learning is probably all the kinds of learning you've been doing already, which is one professor or one person stands at the front of the room, they talk, and then hopefully you learn something. Whereas emergent learning, it really puts the learning onus on that of the students. So the students are really the focus there. And what I like to do is apply both of these things to experiential learning. So what exactly is experiential learning overhaul? Basically, it is the primary, you're primarily focusing on the experience of the learner. So specifically, what are they doing? What are they doing in order to learn, and how are they creating that knowledge on their own? Experiential learning is also about compelling tasks. So internships is a bad example, but I will use it. If you've had an internship in the past, you are doing tasks that will help you attain new knowledge, attain new information, attain new mastery. And experiential learning is also something that is personal, it is social, and it is constructive. And constructive is the main part of what experiential learning is. So it's the basis. And what I like to say is that experiential learning via constructivism is that students create knowledge. So with traditional learning, like a professor standing at the front of the room, they are just speaking and hoping that that information lands in your head somewhere and makes sense to you. But constructivism and experiential education, the students, you yourselves, are actually working and creating that knowledge on your own. And that work, that interaction, is the interaction between teacher, students, peers, and in the environment. So it can happen between any number of people. Teacher between students, students between peers, and peers in the environment. So traditional learning, these are all things that we already do with traditional experiential learning. Cooperatives, internships, study abroad, and outdoor education. These are all different ways in which we learn experientially because we are actually doing something. We are not just listening to someone talk. And that really works on a cycle, and that cycle is conflict, resolution, and adaptation. So there is a problem, a resolution needs to be found, and then the person who is learning needs to adapt to it. So that is how the experiential learning works, and it is all based on a cycle. So there's 4 stages. There's do, reflect, conclude, and plan. So by doing, you're actually physically doing something. So whether that's climbing outside or working an internship or doing something else, there is actual physical activity. Then you reflect, so the student now has done that activity, now they need to reflect on it. What exactly has happened? Does it make sense with what I've learned in the past? And if it doesn't, how do I reconcile that? Conclude, the student thinks about, okay, this didn't make sense with what I've done in the past, or this doesn't make sense with what I understand about the world. What conclusions can I draw about this? And the last part, plan. So based off of that, they will then plan a next action, and they will cycle back around to do. So what does this have to do with games, and what does this have to do with Pokemon Go? Well, as gamers, which I hope all of you are because you are at PAX, I hope my next talking point will work because it's a video. We are all experiential learners because this video is not playing right now, and it should be because I worked out the time to do it like this. Let me see. Come on. Well. Oh. Nope, I know you guys are Pokemasters. So that talking point has also been effectively killed, but it is a video of Mario dying repeatedly, because as gamers, you are all learning experientially by having your character, your avatar, die repeated times. For any of you who like roguelikes, you know that once you do something and your character dies or your game is effectively eliminated, you know not to do that again. And when you don't do that again, you have learned experientially through that process. So all of you, as gamers, should have been gaming experientially at some point. And I know I talked about constructivism before. Constructivism, like I said, is how students will make knowledge from this information. So unlike traditional learning where there's a professor trying to just give you info, you are creating it on your own. So constructivism is really a process of meaning making. How do I make meaning from this experience that I just had? And constructivism in technology is about modeling, scaffolding, and collaborating. So who here by a show of hands has ever played Minecraft? All right, so a lot of you. Minecraft is an example I use with a lot of my students that models, scaffolds, and collaborates. The model is that you exist in this virtual world. There are things and resources. You know that physics works in this world. Fire works. Things can kill you. You can fall down a pit and you can mine. It's scaffolded in that you know that there are resources in this world and you can make things from them. That is the structure and the design of the game. And it's collaborative because while you can play Minecraft by yourself, you could probably play with others in order to make something larger together. So it's synergy. It's about making something that's greater than the sum of its parts. With that in mind, who here has ever heard of MOOCs before, by a show of hands? All right, so MOOCs, if you have not, hold on a sec. If this video doesn't work, I will just talk about it. All right, my computer is dead to me. MOOCs are massive, open online courses. They were, at least the people that work in higher education, kind of like our messiah for what was going to happen with higher ed as a whole. But MOOCs had some missteps, and what was that? MOOCs were supposed to be the calling that higher education, at least in the United States, at colleges and universities, were going to be able to use to solve our dilemma. But they were totally disqualified as a replacement. They came out in force in 2012, and they were really good at recruiting students. So you had tens of thousands of students registered for these MOOCs from Stanford or MIT, learning about all that you could, but they were really bad at engagement and agency. Do you know what, on average, how many students actually finished a MOOC course? Yeah, it was around 3 to 5%, so not that many. Out of tens of thousands of students that registered for it, so it was not very good. So what is happening right now? Well, there's expansion of remote work. Who here, I know at least one of you works remotely, so who here works remotely? Ah, I see you. So with the expansion of remote work, what we have right now is also the emergence of online opportunities. I know a bunch of you had internships in the past. Did you also know that you can have an online digital remote internship? Because that is something that this other video was supposed to explain, but instead I will tell you about it. With the advent of online experiential learning, now we can take that experiential process, something that you traditionally had to do in person, physically at a location, and you can do it online. You can do it digitally, and you can collaborate digitally with other people. Here's to hoping. Nope. All right, so with that in mind, we know about experiential learning, we know about digital education. What needs to change? And here's what I've been able to find throughout my research. Feedback, empowerment, and self-direction. These are all different aspects that I think, when you combine experiential learning with digital learning, can make for a really effective system. So the first thing is feedback. Show of hands, who's played Dance Central? Okay, so I know a bunch of you at least have moves good enough to play Dance Central, because Dance Central is one of those applications, one of those games that gives you immediate feedback. Because if you don't dance well, the game ends, right? That is the immediate feedback. If you're doing great, you totally get flawless achievements and all that. In order for good experiential education to be relevant in a digital environment, it needs to have good constant feedback. The second part is that students need to feel empowered. Who here, are there any tabletop gamers here? I know there's some. Okay. Have any of you played a Euro game or something where you've just fallen so far behind, but you're like 6 turns in and your friends are going to complain if you have to leave? Yeah. So you have to feel empowered in this environment. If you are involved in some sort of activity and you know that your actions don't matter, you have lost agency in that process. So if your actions don't matter, why even stick around? Students need to feel empowered in order for them to keep learning in this environment. And the last part is self-direction. And I bring this up because, I mean, classic game. This screen doesn't say anything else other than it is dangerous to go alone, take this. And that doesn't say, here's your next quest line, here's where you need to go next, you need to pick up this, catch me 12 chickens or something. It just says that you need to take the next step here. And what I mean by that is that students need self-direction. So we need to be able to give them resources, but students need to be able to process that on their own and then take the next step from there. So what are these digital changes? We've talked about experiential education, we've talked about digital education. We're now going to talk about changing the traditional model. So in the past, it has been very teacher-centered. There's always a professor, there's always one person that's talking at the front of the room. We want to move past that. We want to make it student-centered, specifically in experiential learning. And the difference we're going to see right now is reality versus virtual reality. Who here has played Oculus Rift or HTC Vive? Yep, so you all know about virtual reality. It is a great application of digital learning that is somewhat experiential, but I don't feel it is fully there yet. So right now, this is what we're doing, but this is only the present. I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I see us going in the future. So participative learning, these are additional things that I would add to it. Customizable. So since a student-centered process is going to be very specific for the student, we need to be able to customize it for exactly what they need. Customizable so that it is challenging for them, it's not too easy, it's not too hard. Mobile devices on the go. I hope you're all here because you've played Pokemon Go at one point. Mobile devices are huge right now. Most students on college campuses have them, and they are just a great way to be able to use them. And the last part is augmented reality is how we really blend both things. So experiential learning, digital learning combined, you get great things like Google Translate, where you can see translations of foreign languages in real time, actively, right on your device. So blended learning and experiential education, they've kind of existed as separate entities before. They're really going to combine with each other. As part of this research study that I did, one of the quotes I found back in 2013 was this author just said, there were going to be inconceivable applications of both of these things in the future. The video was really good at explaining this. But I will now describe the video in depth with a lot of adjectives. So, the blended learning and experiential education is if you've ever used augmented reality glasses that will then overlay what is basically a heads-up display over reality. So things that you've normally just been able to see in normal reality are now have now been augmented, similar to what's happening in Pokemon Go. And I'm going to hope that that video plays, but it will not because, oh, wait. Oh, wait.
Robo-Raid, which Tom played for a while the other day while wearing HoloLens.
So you tap to place it on the wall, and then it's going to scan your environment. You walk around, and it will scan them, so you can see it pulsating off the walls over there. And this makes the best use, I think, of the spatial sound that you can hear in the headset. So you can hear stuff when it's attacking you from behind. So there you go. And basically, you air tap, and you shoot at these little robots here.
You can also...
The video is so much better. So, that is what's happening right now. Through the emergent technology, this is how we can really apply experiential learning in the digital environment. So with that in mind, what is on the horizon? What do I really see in this new environment in which experiential learning and digital education are going to combine with each other? We now have face-to-face and we have online. Experiential education is definitely something that we want to blend, but in order to do that, I think a change needs to be done in how we think about learner relationships. So as it exists right now, there is just one reality in a face-to-face environment, and that is, I exist here, you exist there, I talk, you listen, hopefully you learn some stuff, but we all exist in the same place, in the same environment. That is traditional learning. But in an augmented reality environment and digital online education, there's actually two realities. Not only do we exist at school, at our home, at our apartment, at our office, at our work, sometimes on a train or a bus, we also exist online as an avatar, as a representation of who we are in a digital environment. And I think that because we cannot acknowledge that right now, that is what is really holding digital education back. So who here has also heard of simulations in virtual worlds before? I hope so, if you've played games. So simulations in virtual worlds are kind of what we're doing right now in terms of applying experiential learning in a digital environment. And they're great because they are a combo of interactivity and immersion. In this simulation or this virtual world, you can interact with the environment in a very immersive model. And it's great because it prioritizes the application of knowledge. So not only in a traditional environment are you just getting information, but you can create information in this environment and then immediately apply it to what you need to do. And this creates a self-sustaining feedback loop, which, going back to how experiential learning happens, remember, do, reflect, conclude, and plan, creates a loop on itself. I've learned this, I can reconcile that, this is what makes sense to me, this is what I'm going to do in the future, and on and on and on. And nowhere are these two things more prevalent than in popular media. So who here has seen The Truman Show? Awesome. If you have not, spoilers ahead. Truman in The Truman Show has been living in a simulation for all of his adult life, or for all of his life, really. And similar to how we use simulations virtual worlds right now, he is attempting to sail across the ocean and runs into a wall. So in this environment, he has to ask himself, is this real? Because, you know, if you're sailing across the ocean, you normally don't run into walls. So Truman has to ask himself this in this environment. Who here has ever seen Inception? Awesome. Spoilers ahead. Leo leads a team in a dream environment in which they must accomplish a goal. In Inception, in the dream environment, they know that this is not real, but they accept, the people around them in the environment accept it as real, and for the purposes of their assignment, they also accept it as real. And then last but not least, who here watches Westworld? Okay, minimal spoilers ahead. In Westworld, there are people who are real, and there are people who are not. I won't say anything more than that because the show's still going. But in this environment, the reality and the virtual reality is blended to the point where if you can't tell what's real or not real, it doesn't really matter at this point. We've just accepted that this is the existence, whoever you are, a host or a person. That is a well-applied virtual reality or simulation. So we've talked about face-to-face education, we've talked about online education, we've talked about the teacher-centered model, we've talked about a student-centered model. How are these two things going to blend? Traditional face-to-face, again, professor, one teacher at the front of the room. Online education, it is delivered digitally, student-centered. How do we blend both of these things? Well, what I'd like to tell you, and good news for you, is, has anyone ever seen this screen before? All right. So if you've seen this screen, you've probably played one of my first games and probably one of my favorite oldest educational games. You have died of dysentery because you were trying to cross the Oregon Trail. And this is the focus of my doctoral dissertation right now, which is games-based learning. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but why specifically do you want to do games-based learning if we have a good educational approach right now? One is the appeal factor. If you have two choices. You can play games or you could not play games. I think most people are going to want to play games. So that's the appeal factor. Second, it's both casual and formal. You can play games as in-depth as Mage Knight, or you can play Candy Crush, and everything in between. Games can be super formal and simulated, or games can be super casual. I'm going to blame it on the computer. And the last part are that games are intrinsically motivating. And when I say intrinsically motivating is that people want to play games not because they get paid, but because it is just fun for them. And if you ever played a game that's super fun before, you probably have experienced the flow state.
Shots of you know that I'm very passionate about this idea of the flow state, this state of virtuosity and enhanced performance among artists and musicians and writers and elite athletes. They go into this zone where they experience this transient hypofrontality, this temporary moment where the ego dissolves. You get sort of hyper-focused in what you're doing. You drop into theta states like meditating monks, and you're able to achieve excellence and virtuosity that exceeds normal human levels and thresholds for what's possible. We transcend ourselves in these moments of flow.
So through my research, I also found out this thing called the flow state. And some of you who have studied psychology or something like that in the past, or have actually just played games, have probably experienced the state of flow before. So what is flow state? There's three main things. One, in order to engage in a flow state, you need very clear goals. So the example I like to use is like an Olympic downhill skier. Their goal is to get to the bottom of the mountain as fast as possible while remaining alive. That is their goal. In order to do that, they need to pay attention to absolutely everything. So they have a very clear goal in mind. Second part is immediate feedback. So again, I will use like an Olympic swimmer. So an Olympic swimmer is going to see in the lanes to his left or right exactly how he's doing compared to other swimmers. And by swimming, he can then change his relationship to that environment. I'm behind, I should pick up, or I'm comfortably ahead and I'm swimming a relay, I know what to do next. And the third part is to balance opportunity and capacity. And what I mean by that is that players need to feel that they can change the environment. They have some input in this environment. They have an opportunity. The capacity part is that they can actually achieve something there. And you'll see this if you ever play classic games like Super Mario Brothers, because you always start at level 1-1. The opportunity is there. This is your opportunity to play the specific level. The capacity is that it starts out at the very beginning and on its easiest state. From that point on, your capacity grows and your opportunity grows. You get greater and greater challenges. That is what is created by a flow state. So does this work? Talked about experiential learning, talked about digital education. Will this work in colleges and universities in the future? And the answer I found is, I'm 70% sure it'll work. Because all of the different factors are here. We have games-based learning, we have experiential learning, we have traditional learning. All of the framework is here, but how do we know in the future if this will work? Well, we don't know for sure, but I know that the structure is definitely there. The question that often comes up when I talk about this at other colleges and universities is, what about quality? So we have face-to-face education. We've been doing that for millennia. That's how people have been learning. Why change a good thing right now? Face-to-face is historical. We've just been doing it for a long time. What can digital experiential education do? And these are the greatest strengths for digital education. So again, is experiential learning. It's going to be focused on the student. So we always want the student to be that person that is going to create knowledge on their own. We do not want the one person to tell them what is true and what is not true. Secondly, we want it to be customized. So the student should be able to gain from this environment exactly what they want and what they need from this environment. They need to have self-direction. And the last part is it needs to be constructed and scaffolded, which means that students need to be centered in this process and creating that information. And then we also need to provide the scaffolding in order for them to achieve it. So some examples I like to use is Foursquare. Anyone still playing Foursquare over here? One person. Okay. So Foursquare is great because at the very beginning, it allowed people to check in geographically into a physical location. Prior to that, we didn't really have that before. That was your way of interacting with the environment and having self-authorship and being able to change it. The second part is Fitbit. Who here has Fitbits right now? Oh, a bunch of you. Okay, cool. So Fitbits took a classic piece of well, I kind of use that loosely, classic piece of technology, the pedometer, and they socialized it. So not only are you just competing against yourself to see how many steps you can get, you're competing against Ted from accounting or someone else from your office or workplace. Fitbit has taken that model and has now socialized it in playing against other players. And what is a great combination of these two? Pokemon Go. Because not only can you hatch eggs by walking, but you can also check into different Pokestops, and your reality has thus become gamified through using and playing Pokemon Go. So what are some strengths of digital experiential education? Well, we have that active feedback mechanism. We definitely want students to feel like they have agency in this process and they can do things. We have personalized interaction, so it is not just one person delivering the same presentation to everyone, which is ironically what is happening right now. And we also have multimodal delivery, which means that we can engage with students on whatever digital devices they have. So cell phones, laptops, tablets, desktop computers, whatever they happen to be using. And ideally, we want experiential education in a digital environment to be meaningful and purposeful. And ideally, it looks something like this. So those are some of the strengths of digital experiential education. But there are still some weaknesses. Number one weakness is high attrition rates, and that's something we learned from massive open online courses. You can certainly get students, you can certainly get people to participate, but it doesn't mean that they're going to stick around. So that is one of the big weaknesses. Second weakness is that whoever faculty or professor or teaching assistant or grad assistant, whoever, they then become all things to all people. While the process is now student-centered, this person needs to become a mentor, a coach, a guide, sometimes a professor. They need to be able to address this students in this customized learning environment. And the last weakness is that experiential learning is still abstract. There are some things I can teach you experientially. There are some things you can learn experientially, but not exactly everything. Like no matter what I do, I can never convince you that a sonnet is beautiful. That's something that you have to read on your own and come to your own conclusions. Ideally, we want experiential education in a digital environment to look like this. So applied augmented reality. We want to be able to show people something that they cannot read from a book, something that they cannot learn by listening to someone. What we don't want is something like this.
Más tarde, apúrate si quieres una buena calificación.
Voy lo más rápido que puedo.
¿Has pensado en correr? Es saludable y eficiente.
Seguro que no hay más trabajos disponibles. Yo estudié para ser profesora y estoy haciendo mercados.
Y además puedes quedarte con los puntos de fidelización. Eres una monje afortunada. Tienes que confiar en la aplicación. ¿Te sientes inspirada? Gracias. Chao.
¿Quién soy yo?
I think the absolute worst part about that is, can you imagine ad block for reality? You will never be able to escape ads if that ever happens. So some closing thoughts. Experiential education is not new. It's been around for quite some time, the way we learn experientially. It just hasn't been used as much as it can be in colleges and universities. Digital experiential learning challenges how we view education right now. So traditionally it's been very teacher-centered. We want it to be student-centered. The shift is moving from the teacher to the student, and that's something that we need to convince a lot of people is necessary in order for experiential learning to really thrive. MOOCs were the very first step. So again, they were really great at producing students to enroll in these massive online courses. But in order for experiential learning in the future to thrive, you need to prioritize three things. Feedback, again, active feedback. Socialization, make sure that people can connect and collaborate with one another. And the last part is reflection. Because that experiential learning cycle, that reflection period is really important in getting students to be able to learn, come to conclusions and construct knowledge on their own. So that's my presentation. Thank you. I appreciate you coming today. If you have any questions, there's a talkback mic right here. If you have a phone, you can take a picture of the screen which has all of my information. The bottom link right there will actually link you to my Prezi, so you can view this online and see what else, and reference it or whatever you'd like to do. I have a blog that talks about education in higher ed right now. It's called universityxp.wordpress.com. And thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Hello?
Yep.
It works. I wrote down a question.
Cool.
So a major difficulty of gamification in education is making those educational games fun.
Yep.
So like Math Blaster can only go, I mean, it's awesome, but it can only go so far. So like, how do you challenge that problem of like, oh, it gets boring, or as you go further, it's like, oh, let's talk about like chemistry, but it's really complicated, so you can't just like pew at stuff.
I'd say chemistry overall is a pretty tough subject because in order to create an educational game for it, you need to be a content expert in that area. So I say that you don't need to create a game specifically to address an educational outcome, but you can use commercially available games to address the same thing. So I realize it doesn't answer your question totally, but like right now I teach a lot of leadership classes, and I teach collaboration by using some cooperative games like Pandemic. And that's what we can do right now until we can get people to create games that specifically address that learning outcome.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Joe Carino from Albany. I'm actually in academia. I'm an assistant professor as well. And you talk a lot about these things, scaffolding and immersion and blended environments, but there's still a lot of inertia, especially from older faculty members. And with some of our subjects, they change constantly. Yep. So by the time you develop the technology to teach them, it's already outdated. So how do you overcome some of that initial inertia, and how do you keep it going once you have some of the tools in place, but then update them?
When I've talked to faculty in the past about it, I tell them that they don't need to completely change their educational style, their educational philosophy. I say that one of the best ways to change your traditional syllabus is to, instead of saying, hey, here are all the ways you can earn 100 points, which gives you an A in the course, give them enough assignments to attain 200 points, and then let them choose whatever assignments they can best fit that goal. And I feel like that is a good way to give students self-direction and agency over the process. So while I wouldn't say that gamifies it, that definitely gives students more options in order to accomplish the same goal.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Evan Choquette from Rock Hill, Connecticut, and I was just sort of wondering about the whole problem of people leaving or sort of going away. What if, to help sort of gamify it more from both sides, have the students also sort of transition to taking on almost like a mentoring or teacher position themselves, where once they've sort of gone through the process, they help teach others, so it keeps them in the system and maybe helps to like grow the base, where it's like, oh, maybe you're learning this one thing, but you already have experience in this thing, so you yourself can teach something to other people, or assist in that, and then maybe that can help grow the network out more, or like keep people in the system.
Yeah, I think that really addresses the socialization aspect of experiential education. And have you ever used Stack Overflow before?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm
so
a
Stack
computer
Overflow.
science major, so half
awesome.
of my projects are that.
So Stack Overflow is like a community that basically gamifies how people find the correct answer. So, I mean, right now we can use wikis to create like a knowledge base, but just being able to create a structure in which students can connect with each other is good enough. If you can gamify it, even better. But I mean, that exists right now. It's just something that needs to be implemented more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, my name's Reed. I was just wondering, what factors do you think are going to drive adoption
Drive what?
drive adoption of these platforms. Like there is some stuff out there, but not nothing like in terms of development of AR softwares for educational content and things like that. What do you think is going to drive development and adoption of these kinds of technologies in both higher education and high schools and middle schools and across the board, sort of?
I'd say right now, unfortunately, what's driving it is commercial interest. So long as someone can profit by it, then they will create some sort of platform that addresses it. I think after I did this study, I really kind of examined what we've done before and where we can go and what would be a great direction to go in. And I like to use that last video as an example where if we over-rely on commercial interest, it will just become another ad platform.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, like, I really want educators in higher ed, people that work in higher education to be able to direct the flow.
Yeah.
But it's good. It has to be something that we want and something that we can tell developers and make our interests well known.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Beth. I'm also in academia. My question is how do you strike a balance between a really well-designed digital education experience and giving students a space to kind of hack through the system or break things or discover things? You could have a perfectly designed chemistry project, and yet the students could also learn a lot from being able to kind of break the program entirely and figure out the outside limits. And how do you balance those factors?
I have gamified past student trainings for my students in the past, where I basically like use points in order for them to earn like achievements. And I find it really interesting when my students break it, because they show me a way they show me a side of something that I had not seen before. So I think working on the assumption that when students break something that is bad is like a limiting belief. So if they do break it, okay, that's interesting. How did they do it, and how can I address it in the future? So I will correct the syllabus or however I've structured things, but then I will ask them, how did you find it, and how did you come to that conclusion? I kind of use that as its own experiential learning opportunity. Like, you've done something, let's reflect on it, and how could you use this line of thinking to affect how you will learn in the future?
But do you think it's possible to create a truly gamified space that also leaves room for rewriting the game?
I think so. I don't know if it'll happen within like the foreseeable future. I mean, ideally for me, if we get some sort of Ready Player One environment, I'd be super happy about that.
I think that's called democracy. Just rewrite the rules.
Yeah.
People can rewrite the rules. So I had a question about that. What was the source of that second video? Was with all of the ad traffic and everything going on and this sort of virtualized projection, was that from some sort of film or something?
It's from YouTube, and I think I just Googled bad gamification, and that came up. So I'm not 100% sure, but if you give me your contact, I could give you the specific link.
Okay. The second question was just, I guess it kind of connects with what she was asking about, like breaking the game and so forth, but do you think with gamification you kind of create sort of a purely extrinsic incentivization structure? Like, can you essentially get students to self-motivate or get them in the mindset of like creating their own game, I guess, in a way? Like, how do you get them to then transition from after the course being self-motivated to try and pick up and build on the knowledge base that they've built through the coursework? Like, I guess my concern is sometimes with existing coursework, you already see students where it's like, all right, they learned that for the course. They're like, great, put it down, never think about it again, instead of like just integrating and thinking about it and putting it into the rest of their knowledge base, or like trying to build on that. And I kind of look at gamification sometimes and I kind of wonder that, I think it might hasten that sort of trend, because people say, yep, got 1,000 out of 1,000, put that aside, never look at that subject material again.
I think not forcing, but making students do purposeful activities in which they can immediately use that information. And I realize that after the course ends, you're no longer in charge of the course and you can't provide those opportunities. But if I really concentrate on showing students activities and experiences that they could not otherwise do on their own or would not have otherwise found. And then after that, it's just kind of hoping that this experience was a good one, and something that they learn from, and something that they can apply in the future. But really, in a student-centered, self-directed environment, we have to give them the onus. We have to just, and they can take the next steps from there. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
I'm guessing all of you are waiting for the next panel? Oh, okay. I thought you were just humoring me by sticking around. But thank you for coming. I appreciate it.